Hello folks and welcome to our game with myself, Shane Stapleton. I'm joined this week by Ciaran Carey and John Meyler. And just for people who are wondering why Michael Verney isn't here, he had a little daughter the other day, so I think he's going to be caught up for the next little while. So congrats to Michael. Ciaran and John, how are you doing, men?
Good, Shane. Good to see you.
Morning.
Morning, John.
Ciaran, we'll start off with you and what we saw last Sunday. Limerick beating Clare by a point, 123 to 122. Your men just keep finding a way to get the job done.
To do, Shane, and I suppose nearly every second time they go out, they're kind of creating their own bit of history. And Friday was no different, to be fair. And I suppose in my own opinion, I'd probably put it down as the sweetest one for lots of reasons. I suppose 5 in a row, number one, win it in your own backyard, number two. And I suppose it adds a small bit of spice to it once you beat Clare in the final. And I don't know, whatever it is about this year's Munster final, it appears from where I'm standing, probably the most competitive Munster final that I've witnessed myself this year.
John, what did you make of it?
I questioned Ciaran there on that last sentence. He said the most competitive because talking to Sean Moran at the Irish Times during the week, Limerick are missing their two most important players, Sean Finn and Cian Lynch. And Declan Hannon has gone off after about 45 minutes, 50 minutes in the last two games. And Limerick are still winning their matches. Now, that's their resoluteness and their toughness and their hardness, which has been built up over the last few years. But, I don't think teams are stepping up to them. I think Limerick have come back a bit. Without Finn and without Lynch that they had over the last few years, and they've been really, really good. And I think if they had Finn and Lynch, no, they haven't got them. So, they're not fit enough to play. It was competitive last Sunday. I was surprised with Clare really playing the match in Limerick. I would have gone to Thurles really. And then there was one or two, tactical issues in the game that allowed Gillane especially to get advantage really, and that was it,
Yeah, like John, so you've been a manager at inter-county level, and the fact that Brian Lohan left that call of Cian Nolan for so long or didn't sit somebody back, obviously the idea is to press up because you don't want Limerick walking the ball through the lines and hitting 30 points like they had been doing. Like, what do you think what do you think Brian Lohan was thinking as he was looking in? Because the rest of the country was going, what are you doing?
But sometimes as a manager, and I've had one or two as well on the sideline where you have blind spots, even in 2018, we were 6 up against Limerick with 8 minutes to go. And, we only got a point from Hoggy in injury time to level the game. Limerick got 7 in a row. And people say to you afterwards, why didn't you put a sweeper in? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Now, I would have thought, from the start that they would have put Shane Amori on Gillane, and obviously Shane would have known Gillane over the last few years. And you go with experience, especially going to Limerick to play Limerick in Limerick. You're giving them, probably 4, 5, 6 point advantage straight away playing at home, and then putting Mori on Gillane and really, tying him down. And I thought that's but it's the quality of the ball coming from the Limerick backs then that helps Gillane then.
And Ciaran, the way you look at it, I suppose the fact that Clare did give up the home advantage, and maybe there was a bit of jiggery pokery in the background that, Limerick, you were saying, oh, we're only going to play it in Cork, and you have Clare looking for Thurles that eventually, Clare decided, let's just play it locally. It's 10 minutes out the road or whatever. Do you think that was a decisive thing for a finish and how it panned out?
Possibly, yeah, but I just want to clarify what I said about the competitive Munster Championship. Limerick's first game against Waterford, they got a result Waterford could have won. Limerick drew against Tipperary. Clare beat Limerick by a point. Limerick beat Cork by a point, and Limerick get over the line by a point. So that's pretty new to me, Shane. Like, when you look at Limerick in the last few years, especially the first 3 Munster Championships and 2 All-Irelands, they were demolishing everyone. And I suppose they're winning dirty games now. But as John said, not only that, but they're winning them under strength and not performing to the level that they're used to perform. So that's always a great sign. Yeah, I think Clare, they probably led the gauntlet down, Shane, really. Probably the message they sent out, we don't really mind where we play, we'll play in your own backyard. But myself personally, possibly, a double header. And I know probably you won't get this kind of cross the line with the Munster Council, but a double header in Croke Park would have been absolutely fantastic. But no way, if I was a player in playing in the modern game, would I be in agreement to play a Munster final and someone's home patch? Straight away, like, you're giving away a huge advantage there.
Yeah. Do you think some players would have kind of gone out mentally a little bit behind, John?
Yeah, certainly. You say, look, and knowing from down here in Cork that you'd go to Thurles, play Limerick. If you were playing Limerick or Clare last Sunday, we'll go to Thurles. And nearly every team in Munster wants to play in Thurles anyway, because, there's a fantastic atmosphere there. If you look at atmosphere last Sunday, you look at the atmosphere in Limerick, and then you're going to Croke Park for the Kilkenny-Galway game. Christ, there's 28,000 there. I think there's no atmosphere. The crowd is, the Hill 16 end was empty. The top of the Cusack Hogan stand is empty. There's no atmosphere. And where you're down in Limerick then at 43,000, this is what Munster Championship. And I think we're missing a small little point or two here. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of, atmosphere in Munster finals where you don't get in Croke Park because of the size of the crowd. And Ciaran is 100% right there. And I mentioned that to Jackie Tyrrell during the week about, having a double header with 83,000 at Croke Park would have been full. No, Munster Council are not going to give the gate of that to the Leinster Council or anything like that. So they're always going to stay in Munster. So that's a non-runner. But look, the atmosphere is brilliant down in Limerick last Sunday. But I would not give anybody any advantage at all. I'd have stuck with my guns if I was Clare and said Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and that's it.
Ciaran, Shane, I suppose up until the last 2 or 3 years, I suppose with Sean Tracy, with Lohan, tactically, they've kind of nailed it every day they went out. And tactically last week, including the venue, probably came to bite him, catch him in the left cheek eventually, because, irrespective of what kind of cornerback was on Aaron Gillane last Sunday, it doesn't really matter, because the type of ball and the space was in front of him was absolutely, you couldn't defend it.
Perfect.
And I suppose they lost their shape, and if they held their shape, they might have had some chance. So Gillane was totally red hot last Sunday, but it wasn't only Gillane. It was, as I said, the grass, the space that he was allowed. And usually Clare.
Yeah. The quality usually of the ball coming out of the Limerick backs was what made Gillane in a way. Like if the Limerick back coming out was put under savage pressure to clear the ball, then Gillane wouldn't get as good a ball as he got. I think.
No, I totally agree. But when I said the shape, John, if I'm a halfback on Dermot Burns, I'm looking up and I'm looking across the way, and I see nobody in front of Aaron Gillane, automatically I'm going to put it there. But if the shape is held, you're going to think twice, and I suppose the forward at that stage then is going to apply even more of a squeeze on Burns, so he's going to be caught.
Yeah, I found when I was looking at the match the other day, the ball that David Reedy played in for Gillane's goal, it was a beautiful ball. So he initially turned and looked back at his half-forward line. And let's say, so it was 2 half-forwards, maybe Tom Morrissey and Gearóid Hegarty. Instead of sprinting forward, which allows the backs to sprint backwards as well, I think the two of them pulled out, which meant that the half-backs were caught in no man's land. And then when Reedy turned to pop it in, they weren't already sprinting back in. So, that's very smart from the Limerick forwards, Ciaran. And
even though they're underperforming, I suppose, but if you look at all the inter-county teams, and we come to the Leinster final in a minute, right, because their usage of the ball actually wouldn't be as tight and as skillful as Limerick. Limerick are probably the masters at holding the ball, minding possession, and giving brilliant delivery, as John said there. There's no 50-50 ball into the forward. It's consistent 60-40, and they're patient and they're tolerant. They'll hold it until they see an opportunity and they'll give it straight away. So, Shane, that side of the game is fairly consistent, and they have perfected that for the last 4 or 5 years. And at least when you're looking at Limerick, even though they're underperforming, that part of the machine is still good and consistent.
John, when you look at the Clare team, where can they go from here? It's not like they went to extra time this time, so physically, they were probably more spent last year. But also, even though Tony Kelly scored 4 from play, there's probably more in him. David Fitzgerald didn't fully get going. Maybe Ed McCarthy never fully got going. So there should be more in these lads.
Yeah, but I think that they've 1 or 2 points to set out. They have to get their backs right. They have to get that position right at cornerback, and I think that's the key point. You've got to get Kelly more on the ball. I think at times I see him. I get frustrated with him. He's floating around. He's not on the ball. and then ball into, you know what I mean, they brought Shanahan on and one or two more on. I think they just need to up the work rate of the forwards in terms of when the opposition backs have the ball. And that was what Ciaran is saying there, is that quality ball to Galan and into the Limerick forwards. Clare have got to work harder on that, preventing ball going into the Clare's opposition forwards. And you know, if you'd taken Galan out last Sunday, then I don't, you know, Clare possibly could have won the game. But it comes back then to the ball coming out. And I think that Lohan has to address that.
Do you think Clare finished from here, John, or can they come back?
No. You've time to go back. You've time to look at it. You know, I mean, and because of the short time frame, you know, Limerick and Kilkenny have 4 weeks. Clare don't have that. You know what I mean? But I think Lohan will be positive. He's there, but getting across the line, like we had him in 18 and 19, and we got over the line. You know, they were 8 up going into half time. Seamus or Luke Meade got a goal, back to 4, and then we, you know, beat them comfortably then the second half. I think there's one or two little things that Clare need to just adjust to get right, you know, and you're into Croke Park now really for situations now for semi-finals, and that's the key point.
A few of the
John, would you agree, John? I suppose, yeah, and I totally agree with you, but I suppose the one thing that has to be nailed, you have to put out your strongest 15 on any given day to have any chance. Because going to Shanahan to me actually has always been a handful for Limerick anytime he plays them, whether it is the league, Munster Championship or All-Ireland Series. He's one player that always kind of, you know, disrupts. He's a kind of a big crane, a big Gonzella, and, you know, he's always done well against Limerick. So I was kind of...
He could be on fire. He could be on, like the likes of Shanahan there in you know what I mean, sometimes plays really, and he's difficult corner forward. You know, I've come up against him once or twice where if this guy comes on or he starts, he needs to be pointed out. And that's a critical point element there. But what Ciaran said there, Shane, about, you know, putting out starting your strongest 15, the other theory is do you finish with your strongest 15? You know, like Limerick are bringing on Call and they're bringing on Cathal O'Neill, you know, one or two more there. So it's just to get the balance right from the start, but get the balance right at the finish. If you look at Kilkenny, you know, who they're bringing on then at the end. Like Walter comes on for Martin Keown the last day. Well, no, okay, it was an enforced injury. But Ciaran, I made the point there to Shane about, do you start your strongest 15 or do you finish with your strongest 15? And I think Limerick, like with Colin and Cathal O'Neill, they can rotate them. And you could fill us in more on Cian Lynch. But I think he's critical now going forward for Limerick. For that extra comfort, I think, in games that you're going to win games by 4, 5, 6, not by 1 or 2 points.
Yeah, and Limerick have been very consistent with Graham Mulcahy, you know, to be.
I don't know what's happening with Ciaran at the moment. There must be someone ringing him something urgently, and it's cutting in with his connection. Can I ask you one, John? There's a few people who've sent in comments a few times because we asked you for your predictions, and look, we all put our necks on the block.
I know what you're going to say. Cork, Clare, and Tipperary. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So the Clare people were a bit put out when you picked Clare not to come out, and they're like, "Oh, you got trapped." So you thought it was going to be. I think the term you used was straightforward, and they took awful umbrage with that.
What?
They took awful umbrage with that.
But you live by your comments, Shane, and you know, you asked me for my opinion, and I gave it to you. I said Cork, Tipperary, and Limerick, and that's what I thought. Honestly, at the time you asked me, that was going back probably 3 months ago. I didn't think, you know, I said to you, and if you go over your video, that Waterford weren't going great at the time, and look. You know what I mean? They lost 3 games, won 1 game, which really didn't matter. And I thought Clare were going poorly at the time. And based on that evidence at that point in time. But I still maintained this morning that Clare have 1 or 2 issues. And as I said to you, they need to straighten them out. But Limerick have 1 or 2 issues as well and need to be straightened out. You know, like hopefully, I like Cian Lynch. I think he's an outstanding player. I'd like to see him back in there. So I'm not wrong yet, Shane.
Well, you see, I like that you put your neck on the block as well. It's just that people always, and same here, myself and Bernie, we always do our predictions or our top 10s of this, that, and the other, and then people come hard for you. But I said I'd ask you about it anyway.
But I've always, as a manager, Shane, down to the years, if you win, you're right. If you don't, you're wrong. It's simple. And I was wrong. I should have the first letter was right, C was right.
You know, we had a question in here from Hurling 1234. He says, and this is related to the Keane Nolan thing, and you know, there was a couple of weeks obviously between their last group game, which was against Cork, and then the Munster final. How much do you pick your team on training games or on reputation?
100% on training games, 100% on fitness. Like Brian Lohan or John Kiley are the only people that know what's going on inside the Gaelic grounds or inside Cusack Park. They'll know how so-and-so is playing. And if you look at that, and if you look at a guy who's going really, really well in training, and you look at that, and you look at the whole lot of it, the way he plays, the way he trains, the way everything he does. And then you go and you ask the senior players, you know, the leader group to say, you know what I mean, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And generally the players will tell you who to play. But you go on training, so you look at a guy who's doing really, really well in training, and you pick him on that. You pick him on that basis. That's it. And then, you know, you start the game, and then you see how a game goes, and that's it, really, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose the plus point for Clare is that this year, okay, last year they got it wrong in the All-Ireland semi-final. You've no more opportunity to put things right. They do have an opportunity to go from here and put things right. I was at the Leinster final. Now, you mentioned the fact that the atmosphere was poor, and it was brutal. Yeah. And for about 40 minutes, I have to say, I was pretty bored, even though the game wasn't that bad, but it just sucked the life out of it. Yeah. We got a great finish, 421 to 226. For Killian Buckley, talk about a dream finish.
But the one thing I admire about Buckley there, and I said this to Jackie Turrell, was Buckley got that ball and he was probably 25 yards out, and there was only one thing in Buckley's head, and he just put the head down, went to the right. You know, now the goalie was blocked. In fairness to the goalie, there were so many bodies there. There were probably too many bodies there. He might have got to it if there was only one or two backs there or forwards there. So, look, I admire Buckley for that. And if you look at it, Kilkenny have got 9 goals in the last 2 games. Like, they've really punched holes in defences, and they've gone for that. And I said to Jackie there was an incident in the Clare Limerick game where Tony Kelly picked up a ball 30, 40 yards out. And it was in injury time, and he tapped the ball over the bar, and I was kind of saying to myself, I said, Jesus, Tony, this was a situation where you should really have gone for the juggler. Now, it's easy for me sitting in the stand and watching the game and saying, "Go, you should have gone for a goal." But I just compared the 2 scenarios there. Buckley got the head down, knew they needed a goal, and stuck it in the corner. Now, a bit fortuitous the way it came to him. The Galway back kicked it out. He caught it, went in. You know, Tony was out further. But it just small little things there. And I think that Tony should have gone in that time for the goal.
Ciaran, actually, we've just come back to we were talking a bit about the Leinster final, but I have to ask you about the ending of the Munster final. Clare were robbed when they didn't get the free.
No, my apologies there. My phone kept saying overheating. So I had to get the wife's phone. Yeah, come here. And I suppose, it was a very frantic kind of finish. And to be fair, I wouldn't wish that for any referee, because he was in a tough situation. I think he was emotionally kidnapped the minute he saw the crowd automatically coming on. And, it was all Limerick. I'd say, psychologically, without him realising it, he wasn't going to disrupt the party. And that could have been on his mind, because, the Tony Kelly incident, it was as crystal clear as the water is in Ballyheight. It was a free, so that was pretty obvious, Shane. And, sport to sport, we saw how the Leinster final finished in the last 2 seconds. And I was here watching with my wife, and she made a comment. She felt very sorry for Clare and very sorry for Henry and all that goes with it. So I had to pleasantly remind her. I said, "Do you remember 94? We were 5 points up, 5 minutes to go." I said, "That's sport." And then that knocked that in the head, Shane. But that's sport, Shane. Anything can happen on any given day, That's the way it goes. You have to take the good with the bad. But yeah, if I was Clare, if it's a free, you need to give it. And there was 2 frees there. And as I said, I'd say that the referee was obviously kidnapped emotionally by the whole thing. Limerick or nearly crossed the line. It was in the Gaelic grounds, and I'd say probably played a part in it,
Would you agree with that, John?
But Jesus, Cian, you're there as the manager, Brian Lohan, and you've been going hard for the last 9 months, and you're saying, Christ, one decision, like one, like you go back to us in 18, Ciaran against Limerick up in Croke Park. Cadigan was coming out with the ball and he was held up by, I think, just Kyle Hayes maybe, and he gave a free in instead of a free out. There's just, Jesus, there's small little things, and God knows what would have happened if Limerick had got that, or Clare had got that point, or small little things there, and
John, they're huge, because that's a huge moment in the game. And it wasn't that it was, should it have been a free? Should he have given it? Did he see it? It was so obvious and blatant. Stevie Wonder would have spotted that it was a free.
And then going to the other final, which had the late dramatics as well, Ciaran. What did you make of Cillian Buckley's finish? And also, Galway were scrambling, and they were clearly tired. You had players, they could barely strike the ball. Pádraig Mannion loses his hurley. I don't blame him for just swinging a boot at it, but it was very dramatic.
It was kamikaze stuff, really. You didn't expect it. Now, to be fair, as John said there about the Leinster final, I actually felt, as an Leinster final, I really enjoyed the game. I thought there was a lot of quality of hurling, great scores, full of passion. The use of the ball on both sides, really, it was kind of, when it's in defence, kind of just get rid of it, get it out of our way, and it's usually downed in on top of Kilkenny player, where it is 2-1 or 3-2. But for a finish, Shane, you could see poor Gareth Kerrod McInerney, he kind of, swipe at it there with one hand, but I suppose in the heat of battle, Shane, and I suppose this is where the modern training comes in. You have to be ready to rock and roll for a good hour and a half. And what I mean by that is you have to be as physically strong in the first 5 minutes, equally in the last 5 minutes, and that wasn't the case.
Very tough though, John. I mean, these lads are putting the body on the line. It's probably, what can you do if you're tired, if you're that wrecked at that stage? What can you do?
Well, that's what Ciaran said there. Goes back to your training. It goes back to training week in, week out, and the scenarios that you create in training where you put a ball down there for forwards and look, lads, we're 2 points down. We need to get a goal in 30 seconds. Or backs, you need to bring out the ball. And I would always say to backs there, don't panic, go down on the ball, pick it up, bring it up. Christ, if you look at that corner flag incident, there were fellas kicking it, poking it, even TJ was in the middle, he was poking it, they were all poking it, and nobody, somebody said to me during the week, kick it out for the 65, kick it out for the sideline. Christ, we know what happened with sidelines in 2013, so that's tiredness then, that's weakness, that's not being at that level. I don't think Limerick cornerback Dan Morrissey or those would have done that. He'd have put his arse over the ball, picked it up, walked out, or Owen Cadigan as well, tried to get a free out to calm the situation down. And that's what we've all I've lost games. Lord of mercy, I'm Teddy Mack during the week. 1984 club football final down here against Immokalee, and we've lost it with the last kick to the game where they got a goal. And we Ciaran has numerous, Ciaran's point in Thurles and that, and we've had numerous incidents where you lose games in the last minute, and Christ, we remember those and we're never let forget them.
No, and John, you were right. That particular incident, and you're 110% right, was crying out for a defender to take control, cover the ball, and away you go. And you either get fouled or you touch it out. And, fitness and composure that actually was required at that particular stage. But, yeah, a horrible way to lose a game, the dying deaths when you think you're there. But that's sport.
And that's where Limerick, like, the likes of Sean Finn and those, he's been an all-star for 4 years. You'll have those tight situations now coming closer in the semi-final and in the final. That's where you really need your ultra composure there. That key thing about calm down, pick it up, keep doing the simple things, then out you come with the ball.
And Ciaran, the bench for Kilkenny, like the experienced players came on. We've mentioned Cillian Buckley, but Walter Walsh came on. He made an impact. Pádraig Walsh came on and scored a point. Whereas if you look at Limerick, it was young lads who did it. So, like, you have one side, they're calling on the old guard, and for you, it was the young lad.
Yeah, and Shane, I suppose, which side would you like to be on?
Well, the winning side in both cases.
Yeah, but in fairness, the two examples that you're giving now, I suppose, really Kilkenny and Limerick, I'd probably argue the point of they're the strongest squads in the country, the two of them. And I suppose what's a bit scary from the Limerick point of view, you're kind of slipping in young Adam English there nice and quietly. He's new to it, and he's a super hurler in the making. Also, Colm Coughlin's getting a bit of game time. And to be fair to Colin O'Neill, outside of Dan Morrissey, he's been our most consistent player. But Kilkenny, in fairness to him, Shane, they were down 3 or 4 big guns last week, and in typical Kilkenny style, they worked for each other. Every sub they brought on, they started a new few players, even young Phil, and they took him off. I could even tell by last week, even though he underperformed, there's a right one here in the making also. So it's probably building up, Shane, now for a brilliant All-Ireland series, for want of a better word.
And the games we have this weekend then, John, Carlow against Dublin we'll start off with. The thing I would say about Dublin is they're the sort of team that, for the most part, when they're against one of the big guns, physically they'll compete and they'll probably drag down the scoreline a little bit closer to them. But when they're against a weaker team, they'd rarely tend to cut them apart, like, let's say, Tipperary or Limerick or Cork or whoever might, because they often put up big scores against weaker teams. So this could actually be fairly close on the scoreboard. I
don't think so.
No?
I saw Carlow against Offaly in the Joe McDonagh final, and and they were good, but they're reliant in a way on Marty Kavanagh for a lot of their scores from frees and from play. I think Dublin have hugely benefited from moving to Croke Park. This thing of playing their matches in Parnell Park used to drive me bonkers. Why they wouldn't go into Croke Park and play their matches there. And they've got exposure to the bigger pitch. They've got exposure to that. Now they're in Dr. Cullen Park on Saturday evening. I think Dublin will come out on top. And, I think it's up to Michael has to really deliver this year in terms of Dublin. But playing those Leinster Championship matches in Croke Park will be of benefit. Yeah, the last time they met was in the Championship in 2019. Dublin won 222 to 113. That was in the Leinster round robin. They hadn't met since 2000 before that. What are you expecting, Ciaran, here? Because a lot of people are just assuming Dublin win and then play Clare the next week.
Yeah, I take your point, I suppose. In the past, you are right, because they've been inconsistent, and the so-called weaker teams tend to shove it onto Dublin. But I think, to be fair, what I saw of Dublin this year in the first half against Galway, as I said last week, I thought it was an outstanding performance. And if they can maintain that, I think there could be dark horses. But, maintaining it, Shane, is one thing, but taking action and delivering is another thing. So they appear to be different this year. They have a lot of new hurlers. Their spine is very good. Their full back is top class. Their centre back is very good. And they're up front, Shane. They're capable of hurting anyone. So I believe if they come with Carl and the frame of mind is right, the results should look after itself.
But I do look at it a few years ago that the Coola team that I was with, we lost to St. Mullins of Carlow, and it contained a lot of the same players, James Doyle, Martin Kavanagh. Yeah, Jack Kavanagh. So they're very good players. And then Tom Mullally, I don't know how familiar with him you are personally, but John, he's taken Mount Leinster to an All-Ireland club final from Carlow. Obviously, people weren't expecting that. He's done great with Clare, won a county title in Kilkenny, won with Naas and had them competitive last year. This is a top quality manager here. Yeah,
he's I came across him there when Naas beat Kilmiley in the All-Ireland Intermediate Club there last year. An excellent manager. But I think Carlow's focus, Shane, was really on getting out of Joe McDonagh, getting into the Leinster Championship. They really didn't go hard at the league this year, and they just wanted to get out of that, get into the Leinster Championship. And I think that's their bonus point here. Look, they can have a wrap-off Dublin in Dr. Cullen Park on Saturday evening. They can have a go-off from there. They'll have a home crowd to cheer them on, urge them on. But I still think Dublin will come out of this strong.
And
they looked very competitive, looked very good, looked very drilled, coached very well in that McDonagh Cup finals. So, Shane, if they're going to have any chance, if they come kind of near enough with that same frame of mind, as John said, they have nothing to lose at all. So nobody's giving them any chance. So, they have nothing to lose. So, I suppose from a Carlow point of view, if they could hold that game to about 4 or 5 points, it'd be an outstanding display.
Yeah, and I suppose Dublin are fairly forewarned after what happened against Laois in 2019. 2 years ago, or those 2 years that you managed Carlow, John, how big is the passion for hurling there? I'm going to assume it's huge.
The passion is huge, Shane. But you have to put the likes of Carlow on the same level as Kerry, Westmeath, Antrim, all those teams. Least they haven't got enough players, Shane. I rang Mick Murphy. He was a selector with me in Carlow, and I congratulated him on winning. And he said, "John, it's Mount Leinster Rangers, it's St. Mullins. That they're the backbone of Carlow hurling. You know what I mean? And a lot of their players, Marty Kavanagh, Jack Kavanagh, Doyle as well, they're all St. Mullins. Then you have the Codys in Mount Leinster Rangers. So they're providing the main players for. Whereas if you go look at Limerick, Cork, Tipp, they probably have 1-2 players out of each club, or they might have about 20 clubs represented. Whereas Carlow, you have 3 or 4 clubs. It's the same in Kerry. It's the same in Antrim. You haven't got the numbers, and that's the problem here. You know what I mean? It's a numbers issue. And if all the clubs are not contributing, then you're in trouble. And sometimes you've guys in the weaker counties, then they go to America for the summer, they miss out, and then you're missing them. And it's a numbers issue, Shane. So, look, I think Carlow's goal was to get into the Leinster Championship in 2024 and to get out of the Joe McDonagh, get into the Leinster Championship and see where they are then. But it's extremely difficult, Shane, in those level 2 counties. And then you look at the Munster Championship, and it's ultra competitive. Like the Munster teams are getting better, and it's 10 times more difficult for Kerry, Laois, Carlow, Westmeath, Antrim to fill that void, to fill that gap. Impossible.
And then the other preliminary quarter-final this weekend, Ciaran, Tipperary against Offaly. And, Offaly have had the 3 weeks to sort of come down after that defeat after extra time in the Joe McDonagh final. Darragh Maher, who got sent off for putting the hand across the face guard, but I didn't think it was a red card. That's been upheld, so he won't be playing. I suppose most people are just expecting this to be a tune-up fight for Tipperary ahead of Galway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Shane, to see what way Tipperary approach it, because at the end of the day, everybody thought to the foregone conclusion that Tip were kind of going to jump the fence against Waterford, and it didn't happen. So how are they going to react to that? So there's a huge prize, a huge incentive there for Tipperary. So I'd be expecting a massive performance on Tipperary in this particular one. So will it manifest itself? Only time will tell.
Yeah, and John Cahill Barrett, apparently he's back and played that training match against Dublin. Not entirely sure about Jake Morris. There's hope that he'll play. Looks like Gerard O'Connor might be gone for the season, even, and Brian McGrath as well. Like, Tipperary's panel is fairly stretched at this stage.
Yeah, and Jason Ford missing as well. And, look, I'd expect them to get over Offaly. Offaly had huge disappointment losing to Carlow, and losing the under-20 final as well. So, look, I expect Tipp to come out well on top there.
Yeah, and Ciaran, do you think that a lot of people are tipping up Tipperary this week as being dark horses for the All-Ireland? With the amount of players that Tipperary are missing, unless a lot of them come back in a short space of time, I can't really see that happening.
No, but to be fair, Cahill has got a fair twist out of them, bar that Waterford result. They've been pretty good up until that particular match. And, if they jump the fence, they're throwing them, and if they do it in style, they're throwing themselves right in the mental pot. I suppose, Shane, looking at the All-Ireland series now from here going forward, I think it's actually open for duck season. There's possibly 2 or 3 teams there that are probably, in my opinion, series contenders. And it's up to the rest then to throw themselves in the mental pot. Galway, for example, Gerard McInerney and Dahi Burke, they're 2 guys now that needs to be wrapped in cotton wool, and they need to be minded, and they need to be fresh for the next game, because they're huge for Galway going forward. The rest of the Galway team is fine, but they've been around a long time, and it'll be interesting now to see that type of defeat against Kilkenny, what kind of a mark is going to leave in those 2 guys. Because if Galway are going to do anything Clare this year, or if they're going to contest an All-Ireland final, they'll need McInerney and Dahi Burke commanding in both positions. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out.
And do you think that there's expectation on Tipperary to go ahead and kind of fulfill this role of dark horse, John, and make a real push for the All-Ireland from here? Because you're talking about beating Offaly, Galway, Limerick just to get to a final. Yeah,
but look, I think it comes down to, the semi-finals, really. I think I wouldn't necessarily agree with Ciaran saying there's 2 or 3 contenders. I think there's 1 contender and then there's 3 behind them. I think it's Limerick's to lose. I think if he can get Cian Lynch in there, get him in the centre forward and really get Limerick going, get really ticking, I think Limerick can drive on here. I think it's up to the others. Kilkenny will be Kilkenny because they're used to playing in Croke Park. And I also mentioned that during the week that the Leinster counties get the value of playing in Croke Park week in, week out. The Munster counties don't. So it's I'm not saying it's a new experience, but it's different than playing in Thurles or in Limerick. I think it's Limerick's to lose. I think they'll win it. But, Tipp will give it a rattle. Kilkenny will give it a rattle. Galway will, Tipp. Look, it's there. It's knockout hurling now. There's no messing about now. You really need to put your best foot forward. And as Ciaran said there, get your best players playing well when it matters on the Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock in Croke Park. That's it.
And speaking of which, were you selling us a pup last week, Ciaran, about Keane Lynch, that he should be starting or whatever? You knew he wasn't going to be talking at all, did you?
I didn't. No, sure, listen. Anything that happens within the Limerick squad, it's a bit like the FBI. There isn't a thing that comes out of there, But come here, but as John said there, Shane, big days are for big players. And big players relish on the big days and on pressure. And to be fair, I'm wearing my humble hat. It is obvious Limerick are the serious contenders, but it's up to Kilkenny, the Galways and Tipperary's. And I suppose up until now, Shane, they've all been given opportunities to dethrone Limerick. And to be fair, there's none of them really standing up and taking authority and taking control. Meaning they're not hurting them while they're a bit fragile. What I mean by that is Limerick possibly still are only going 50% to their potential. But the opposition aren't hurting them. They're not smelling it. They're not going for the jugular. That's the only worrying point of view from the other teams.
Who's your hurler of the year at this point, or who would be your contenders, Ciaran?
That's a fair old question. Now, let me give me a bit of thought now. I thought, obviously Gillane throws himself in the middle of that after last week. Tom Morrissey's been very good. Let me see. Cody has been good. TJ Reid, to be fair, has been fairly consistent now as well.
Wasn't on fire last Sunday.
No, he wasn't, but still did enough, John. He still got about 10 points, about 3 or 4 from play. But still, he got about 4 from play. He went up and caught a few balls, made a few things. But my point is, you're not going to get TJ exploding every day. Yeah. But even TJ underperforming is still going to create a bit of hassle. Let me see. Yeah, I was very, very impressed with Joyce this year as well. I thought he was very good. Great player, great future. Very consistent, always commanded, takes control at centre back. So I really like him. I have to say I'm hugely impressed with Blanchfield. He's kind of a Dermot Burns-like, very similar to him. If you could add about 3/4 of a stone of muscle to this guy, he'll be another Gonzella. Hugh Lawler also playing very well. Mikey Butler. I suppose, Shane, there's a good few of them there really that you could pick. But I suppose at the end of it, go on.
I'll let you finish off then, John. Who would be your contenders for hurler of the year?
Too early in the year, Shane.
I love it. Shane, that's half a Kerry answer and half a Cork answer.
And I'm from Wexford. Look, Shane, it's way too early in the year. You're down now, Shane, now to the brass tacks. You're down now to what it really matters now. Last Sunday's matches, we could go through the front door or the back door. We're now down to the last 4, the last 6, and that's really it in a nutshell. Come back to me next week or the week after, and I don't have much time for these accolades of hurler of the year, all stars of the year. You know what I mean? You everybody has to step up now. Ciaran said there about the Galway fellas. Shefflin will be in training this week, Tuesday night, lads. Look, we leave that behind us now, but we really need to step up. Carl and Tipp, lads, we're down a few, but Tipp can still hurl. All Tipperary fellas can hurl. Ling in Kilkenny, he's Walter and those, Richie Hogan driving the background. You can see what's going on there. I looked at Kilkenny on the pitch Sunday. Richie Hogan is standing out on the pitch. They're all helping each other. So look, it's going to be competitive. Give it a few weeks, Shane, and then you can pick your hurler of the year, supporter of the year, all those things.
Look, lads, really appreciate you joining me, and we'll chat to you both again soon.
All right.
Okay. God bless you, John. God bless you, man. Bye.
Okay, so that's the hurling segment of the show. Delighted to say I'm joined now by John Evans. John, you were watching in the background there for a couple of minutes. You were enjoying the crack.
Yeah, just interesting there. I think John Meyler, he got out of a tight squeeze there, but he said it was too early. But the obvious thing is he's perfectly right. But what a championship we've had down here in Munster in the hurling. It has been electric. I tell you something, Kerry they mightn't have come out supporting the Kerry team yet, but everybody is talking about the hurling down here in Kerry, and we know nothing about hurling.
Well, Joe, we'll jump on to the All-Ireland groups in the football, and I'll just bring them up on screen here. So in Kerry's group, Kerry are obviously second because they were beaten by Mayo, who are top, and you've got Cork still in contention and Louth. The second group, you've got Galway, Tyrone, Armagh and Westmeath are more or less out of contention. Roscommon and Dublin are on 3 each, Kildare and Sligo are on 1 each. And then in the fourth group, Monaghan and Derry are on 3 points each, Donegal on 2, and Clare, they're on 0 at the moment. John, Kerry against Louth this weekend, are you expecting just to roll into Portlaoise and win handy?
Well, I tell you, I've one of the few teams I've seen that has learned a lot with the step up this year is Louth. I think their first game was against Cork, and there was only a 2-point difference in it. Now, I'm just showing that I think something around 119 to 117, something like that. But they have learned an awful lot, as have Cork, and we'll talk about them later. But Louth have against Dublin got a non-merciful beating, and while they showed maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, Shane, either side of half time, I think that they can score, and they put up 15 points, which is commendable enough, but they were really open at the back, and I think Mickey Hart has closed that down. As for Kerry opening them up completely, I don't think so. I don't think Kerry are playing well enough at the moment anyway. But that's a horse of a different colour. Against Mayo, then Louth, look, Mayo did keep them at arms. The scoreline doesn't actually justify the way Mayo could have got a few goal chances, missed a few easy scores. It was a 5-point game going into injury time. Louth, though, have learned another thing. They've stayed at it. And they got just commendable goal and a point straight away. And on the kick out, who knows what would have happened. As for Kerry hurting them, yes, I think Kerry are going to win it. But I suppose there's a lot of dissatisfaction with Kerry down here, because I suppose a few weeks ago it was. More than a few weeks ago, we were waiting for Gavin White to come back, Paul Murphy to come back, Paul Ganey to come back, and everything will be sorted. It wasn't, and it isn't. And Kerry are not firing, and I think they'll be using this game to sort of re-establish number one, a bit of confidence. Number two, a lot more players coming into the play, rather than we having the usual David Clifford, Paddy Clifford, and to be fair, Shawnee Shea in the first half in the previous game. But look, Louth have learned an awful lot, I think, and they have come up through the ranks over the last 3 years up to Division 2, is it? 4 to 3 to 2. And I think they're growing in confidence. They've lost a few players, but I mean, there's some excellent players in obviously with Ciaran Downey, Samuel Roy, and Conan McKeever there. They have great forwards, and they're kicking over points and getting good scores now as well. So I think Kerry are looking for a confidence booster. They'll be made work hard for it, but I think they'll win it, Shane.
You know, when people say that, David Moran retired, it took something out of the midfield for Kerry, is that sort of lazy analysis to just put it to one man only? Because surely, you have a panel of 40 players or whatever it is. Yeah, he takes something out of your team because of his leadership and so on, but surely a team should be able to adjust to one player not being there.
Yeah, well, you're putting your finger on a sore point down here now at the moment, Shane. It's a good strategy by an interviewer. Yeah, look, we're disappointed the way the midfield is working out, but previous to that, it was more than just David Moran. Of course, David Moran is a huge loss, and he was a great figurehead and a wonderful guy to catch a ball inside in the square or at midfield. But we had Diarmuid O'Connor on the wing as an out ball, and his partner at midfield, Jack Barry. but it's the replacement and the strategy. That's what's causing the problem with Kerry at the moment. And at the moment, they're playing Dara Moynihan in one wing, and they brought in Spillane in the other wing the last day. But it's not working. It's not gelling yet. No, I would have been an advocate for Adrian Spillane to come in, because I think he shows a lot more physicality, a lot more aggression. He's a good tackler, maybe over robust at times, but that's what we need. We're not a fine-tuned team. But it's just that, look, Diarmuid O'Connor and Jack Barry are not controlling it anywhere near it. And they got roasted against Mayo. They really got taken to town by Paul Conroy and Matthew Rowan. So we'd be worried about it, going about that area. But against them, against the Lout, I think there's one thing they've got to be careful about, is that this is a very, very it's an extremely fit Lout team, and if for instance Kerry don't hit the ground running, I think they'll find a bit of difficulty in this Lout team in O'Moore Park. Number one, I suppose the supporters down here are waiting for them to fire, and when you're waiting and waiting and waiting, it can often be when is it going to happen, and somebody's taking the initiative. Now, the only one that seems to be taking the initiative is David Clifford, Paddy Clifford, and to a lesser extent, I have to say, Paul Gainey came into it, and he's surprising us with his fitness levels, and Shawnee Shea in the first half, as I said, the last day. But I'm just worried about our defence. I mean, Mayo just opened us up completely. Now, having said that, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, because there's 3 games to be played, and Kerry are supposedly up against the weakest team of the 4.
You're definitely not filling me with confidence for Kerry to win All Ireland this year, the way we're going at the moment.
And we're not. There's a lot of criticism towards the new word down here is not simulating what they do in the north, but it is that we're aping what other northern teams have been doing, and they're sort of Jim McGuinness and Ciaran McGeaney and defensive styles we've adopted, and they're blaming poor old Paddy Tally for all this, but
she was the hero last year.
Sorry?
He was the hero last year.
Sure, this is it. This is what I'm saying. The poor man, he can win. But it's just that our defence has been quite open and was open so easily. I think the other side of it, just on the same vein as well, is that the Kerry defence, it certainly needs to be more cohesive. Again, this is where David Moran is missing as well, because tactically David Moran was dropping back into that middle of that square, and for anything that was coming in of a high launch ball. And look, let's face it, only for Shane Ryan against Mayo, we'd have been annihilated, absolutely annihilated. Sorry, go ahead.
Who would have thought that when Jack O'Connor and Mickey Hart came up against each other in the 2005 All-Ireland final, that 2023 they'd be up against each other again? It's very funny.
It is actually, and Mickey is a shrewd guy, and he's you have to hand it to him, lads. Look, Louth were wallowing down in Division 4, and now he is in the senior championship, mother of God, and jumping, division after division after division. But the other side of it with Kerry is that I think the support level for Kerry's style, continuing with this aping scenario, we're missing one thing. And when I travel the country, up and down the country, Shane, the one thing that people are saying, when are Kerry going to start playing the Kerry brand of football? What are they doing? Copying other teams in a defensive structure that's too defensive. And the only one that's covering over all this is David Clifford. And make no mistake about it, he is the shining light. He is the player of the year. He's no doubt about it, a class operation. And we're just disappointed that the rest of the team is not I'm not saying that we should be bravado and swaving up the field and flying up and leaving the back open, but I think just we've gone a bit too defensive, you know.
And then I suppose Cork against Mayo. Cork had that late chance through Stephen Sherlock and he blazed it over the bar. Could have easily been a level game. You think throughout that second half, some of the low percentage shots that Cork took. I remember Brian Hurley taking a free from the ground on the sideline over near the 45. Stephen Sherlock strangely missing a free at another time. Cork easily could have won that game or, you know, been that little bit closer again. And they're up against Mayo this weekend. Very interesting that Kevin Walsh is the coach of Cork. And if any man is going to know Mayo well, it's him.
It is, and I tell you what's more, Kevin has brought on, John Cleary did a very astute thing in bringing in Kevin Walsh, because no doubt about it, absolutely no doubt about it, in the last 3 meetings of Cork and Kerry, Cork have closed the gap, and they could easily have won the game the last day, no doubt about it. Penalty or no penalty, you know, you can say what you like. There was, like you said, they took low percentage shots if they were a small bit composed. I remember Chris O'Jones missing a sitter of a point. You know, it wasn't just barely wide; it was 20 yards wide. You know, and Chris O'Jones had a good game now, but simple stuff that could have been made the game even a lot closer. Now, look, Cork definitely have improved massively. I think Kevin Walsh certainly will know Mayo, and they won't be afraid of Mayo either. I'll tell you that much. If Louth can go, we'll call it come with him within a point. Or now, as I've said already, Mayo did keep them to 5 points coming into that injury time run. I think that Cork have a great chance. They have a young team, Shane. I know them because I'm training a team up in that direction myself, and they're coming. They're very enthusiastic. They're putting in a huge effort, and I think Cork could be in the mix later on in the championship. You know.
And actually, I'm going to come to Galway against Armagh in a second, because I see Galway as the #1 contender at the moment. Maybe others see it differently. Who do you see as the sort of maybe number 1, 2, 3 at this stage?
Yeah, I sort of knew you were going to ask me that. I have clear in my head. About 4 weeks ago, I sat down and looked at these, and I looked at the subs by Dublin, and they had 7 players that I would have put on the next 3 teams, and that was Galway, Mayo, Kerry. I would have 7 of their subs on those 3 teams. Now, that's what if Desi Farrell gets his timing right, gets his run right, what he's available to him is unbelievable. And I'm not going to list them all out because, look, but he's added a few. Then Pascal has come in there as well. Jack McCaffrey has come in now. Mannion is in. John Small is back again. Killian O'Gara played very, very, very well in the league. He may be injured because he hasn't been used yet. But by God, I'll tell you something. He was very impressive to me. So, yeah.
He got a bit of an out last day, didn't he, John?
He did. Yeah. He's back.
Yeah.
He's back because what I was watching for to see, he wasn't even on the panel for the previous 2 games, I think. And he played the last day. He's a good player. His physicality, that guy, and he's got a left foot in him that's bang on. But anyway, your question you asked me, I've Dublin out in front, and I've no doubt about it. And I'm not saying I put my house in it. People are saying they're leggy. I think it's all about timing. And what's his name? Desi Farrell has been using different sections of the panel. Yes, Galway, I agree with you 100%. Galway have learned a lot. But I don't know. Frank Bulls got sent off between themselves and Tyrone. And Tyrone was still there the whole time, Now, the 3 points that was there at halftime was still the 3 points that was there at the end. Maybe I'm not doing justice to Galway. They certainly have improved immensely. And where I think Galway have improved hugely is their 2 wing forwards have come into it massively. And, to me, the 2 midfields of Paul Conroy and Johnny Maher, Matthew Rowan, but I think Peter Cook and Matthew Tierney, the two wing forwards, I think these two boys have really, really come of age. They're physical, they're travellers, they're kicking points, they're defending, and I think that, hey, listen, I'm going to say this, I think Jack Connor could take a lesson from what Padraig Joyce has done with his wing forwards now, because that has made Galway a way more potent. Now the pressure is off Comer to win everything, Shane Walsh, and of course there's a little bit of a nugget in the middle of all this, Ian Burke.
Ian Burke. Yeah.
Oh, he's a class player.
Yeah, he won an All-Star in 2018. Really
he did,
good player.
He's a good player. So look, you might say, well, Jesus, why haven't they got Galway number one? I just think there's a small bit to go in their defence. I just think that. But Mayo are a surprise package, I suppose, this year. They were full of enthusiasm. The same team almost went out, bar Diarmid O'Connor, then the last day against Louth, and God, they were flat. It didn't come off. A lot of misses, a lot of things not going their way. And you have Kerry. So I've Dublin, number one, Galway, Mayo, and Kerry in the same, and right behind on their heels is Tyrone.
And Kerry not in this mix at all?
Kerry are in the mix. Galway, Mayo, and Kerry together.
Oh, sorry. An interesting storyline this weekend is Davy Burke taking Roscommon, who of course you managed before, to face Kildare. That's going to be in O'Connor Park in Tullamore. He won an under-20 All-Ireland in 2018 with some of these Kildare players. He was in the mix for the job when I think it was when Glenn Ryan got the job.
Glenn Ryan.
Yeah. Like, he will be highly motivated to get a victory here, even if it is against his home county.
He's getting some tune out of those guys, and I tell you, I'm in contact with a lot of the Roscommon lads, and they're loving it. You know, he's does a press when he needs to press, defend to extreme, but by God, when they break, there's some team going. Like, you know, I suppose, you know, it's all very well. I saw Diarmid Murta to me is probably up there with Shane Walsh and these guys, and Ian Burke as a finisher. Like, you know, I think that having him too far from goals I see that as a small bit of a too expensive thing to be doing. But when you want to get 15 behind the ball, that's you have to do. And I think Davy Burke has done a marvelous job with them, and they're buzzing. They're loving being there. And I think they'll beat Kildare. I do think. And maybe there's no, as you said already, Davy Burke certainly will have the added incentive of saying, up yours to the Kildare County Board and all the fraternity. I'm here, and this is what I've done. This is what you're missing. You should have picked me as manager. And look, that's all well and good and in fair play, as you. But on the other side, Kildare have something to prove. They have something to prove now, in fairness. If they can't pull off this win, I think it will be a very, very poor year for them, to be quite honest with you.
You have an appointment at 9:30, so I'll let you go at that stage, John. But, you know, I've enjoyed having you on as always. And look, we'll chat to you again soon.
Yeah, the last thing I'd say is that there's a big disappointment here that the Louth Kerry game, it's not on RTE, granted, but it's not on GAA Go either. Mother of God, is the whole thing falling down? Is that I think it does disrespect to Louth more than it does to Kerry. And I'm coming from, hey, here is a situation where it's not even considered putting it on, and I think it does a huge disrespect. That could easily be a motivating factor by Mickey Hart, and he's pulled some good ones before.
And like that's interesting. The only other game that isn't on GAA Go in the football this weekend is Derry Clare. You've got a couple of the Tailteann games that are on, and to be fair, you know, that competition has to be covered. But there's 4 games not being covered, and Kerry are one of them. Kerry Louth.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it does a disrespect to Clare, who's put in a great year, like, as well. However, look, if they can only put on a certain amount, of course the Tailteann game should be looked after. But I'm telling you one thing, Mickey Hart and the loud supporters they'll use everything they have, and Jack Connor just want to be a small bit careful. That's all.
Well, John, brilliant chatting to you as always. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, Shane. Have a good weekend.
Okay, so brilliant to have John on as always. By the way, if you want more football, we've got the Poacher Varley show coming up. It's always dynamite stuff, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be playing on Thursday evening, so this evening as you're watching here live now at 9:30. So I think that's the height of it for the show today. Column Lines Blind Spot says, imagine Loud beat Kerry, biggest upset ever. I won't be on TV. Madness, GA, brass fumbling. So that's it for the show today. Don't forget that if you want us to run a fundraiser for you, it's events at ourgame.ie, and we'll help run a fundraiser for your club. Also, if you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/ourgame. That's it for the show today. We'll be back again on Monday reviewing a big weekend at GA. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you then.